Hi, everybody. I'm so excited today because I have never interviewed anyone yet on my office hours, and I'm going to do something special today. It's a friend of mine, Nate Regier PhD. He has a new book that's coming out. It's out this week. So, this is fresh content. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Nate, then we're going to get into the conversation. And as usual, I will look at the comments to see where you're from. So please post and post your questions because even if we don't get to them today, I'm sure Nate will visit later and answer some questions if he can. So Nate is the co-founder, the owner, and the chief executive officer of Next Element, a global advisory firm specializing in leadership communication. Nate is a former practicing psychologist with a doctorate in clinical psychology, and he has expertise in many areas that I could name a lot, but I'm going to name the top ones: social emotional intelligence, leadership, positive conflict, mind, body, spirit, health, neuropsychology, group dynamics, and organizational management, just to name a few. And he's written several books. How many books have you authored, Nate?
This is my fourth.
This is your fourth. Well, a big congratulations. I know what it's like. It's exhausting. It's fun. It's introspective. And I can't wait to dig into this because I'm really interested in the topic, as you know.
Yeah,
Also, I saw that you quoted me a few times in your book, so I was surprised to see that
absolutely.
so much. So I'm going to start out with the most obvious, and you and I have talked about this before, that so many people, so many leaders have this belief that, well, if I'm compassionate, it's going to be about avoiding, it's going to be about looking away, being nice, being liked. So you
Yeah.
can't really have accountability and compassion at the same time. And you say that's a false belief. So take off.
Well, that's the title of the book, is putting two words that most people don't normally associate with one another. And it goes both ways. Sometimes people that are big on accountability say that I can't be compassionate because then we won't be able to get stuff done. And then people will take advantage of me and they'll see me as weak. So yeah, these two words are both so important in our world, and yet we treat them like they're somehow opposite. And the big message of this book is in fact, they're not. Not only are they not opposites, they're not in tension. They actually work together, and you can't have one without the other.
When did you realize this? This is for my own curiosity. Like, when did this become so blatant and so in your face that you had to write a book about it?
Interestingly, we coined this phrase probably 10 or 11 years ago, and we've been using it. I was finding references to it in 2015 from articles that I wrote, but we just kind of said, "Hey, compassionate accountability has got to be a real thing," because we were teaching leaders every day how to have healthy conflict. You know about this. How do we engage in these difficult conversations and talk about important behaviors and at the same time do it with dignity and respect and in a way that actually brings people closer together? So the concept we've been playing with and developing the methodology and the framework for many years. It's just finally and it was a subtitle of my previous book, Conflict Without Casualties. So it's been emerging, but it's been around for a while.
You know, that's interesting because I think those of us that do this kind of work, we tend to be about a decade ahead of what others are seeing. And we'll feel kind of alone in it. Like, am I the only one that thinks this? Or I'm
Yeah.
seeing all these patterns, and we might put it out there a little bit. And then finally, it's so much pressure that you need to write the book about
Yep.
it. I had posted today something about a good way to know that these conversations aren't happening is when the policies keep changing. In other words, we'll
Right.
just change the
Right.
policy because we're not going to. Do you see that as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know you talk a lot about your book as a compassionate mindset. So I'd like to dig a little deeper on that.
Yeah. So compassion, part of the early part of the book, I map what I call the evolution of compassion and look at how our relationship with and understanding and practice of it in the workplace has evolved over the last 20 years. And it really has. And then things really came to a head during COVID. And we really believe that there's not a full enough understanding of the actual concept of what compassion is. I think we still often think of it as just altruism or, meditations and mindfulness practices and or just being really kind to other people, but there's so much more. And the word compassion actually comes from the Latin root meaning to suffer with struggle, with suffer. So when you really dig into it, compassion is hard work, and it's hard work in the trenches with people. And so that necessarily involves accountability. And so we've kind of evolved the definition of compassion to mean the practice of demonstrating that people are valuable, capable, and responsible in every interaction. And that's a mindset. We have to make a decision, a choice to see people that way.
Yeah, the first time you told me about this was before the book was published. I absolutely loved it. And I used it for several days in a row. And I was so glad to get a copy of the book because I wish I'd have thought of those three switches. I want to go into that here in a minute. But the three switches, I really see where if one switch is off, you can do everything right as far as the skill level and the conversation. But there's a switch that's off and people actually feel it.
Yeah.
So it's deep, and I love that you're taking so much time to talk about compassion because it's sort of like the word life balance. What does that mean? Like we all disagree, but that's because there's not a definition that really is accurate.
Right.
There's mindsets about it, and that's what you're doing with this is saying let's take a deeper dive into what
Mhm.
compassion really means instead of just it's touchy feely, it's feeling sympathy, it's being sweet. It's
Yeah.
not that at all.
Right.
I'm going to see if I can navigate this thing and put us up.
Yeah.
There we go. There's the piece that I want to talk about. So I'm going to let you take off on this and explain this.
Yeah. Well, this is the big reveal. This is the big framework. So our working definition of compassion is that it's the practice of demonstrating that people are valuable, capable, and responsible in every interaction. So if we break that down, first of all, it's the practice of demonstrating, which means we are doing this every day. This is something we're working on, and we have to show it through our behaviors. What we are showing is that human beings, including ourselves, are valuable, capable, and responsible. And I'll talk about each one of those because each one is a necessary but not sufficient part of compassionate accountability. And so we came up with this metaphor of these three switches that represent our decision, our choice on how we're going to view people. And then that mindset is evident through our behavior. So, yeah, Marlene, just this morning, you and I were talking on social media, on LinkedIn, about how you can see why conversations go off the rails or why a relationship is heading in the wrong direction based on which switches are turned on or off, or maybe dimmed a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you this because what if you really do see the person as value? You see that there's a shared responsibility, it's yours and theirs, that you truly do not see capability. Like when that's turned off, how do you deal?
Yeah. Well, if I could, I'd love to share an example of what that looks like. So, when we see people as valuable, we accept them for who they are. We value and affirm their experiences as unique and as special and as worthy. When we view people as capable, we believe that they are capable of contributing. So we invest in them. We get curious. We learn and grow together. Responsibility, when that switch is on, we realize that we share responsibility for outcomes. Means no matter what happened before, each of us is 100% responsible for what we do next. So I've seen situations where maybe if I view someone as valuable and responsible, but not capable, I may try to hold them accountable, but without the tools and without the resources necessary. Because if I don't believe they're capable, I don't invest in them, I don't offer them support. So I may say something like, look, the deadline is Friday. I care about you. I love you, man. And you got to get it in by Friday. So figure it out. Rather than saying, my job is to make sure we meet our standards and to be a resource for you. And I believe you're capable. If there's anything you need in terms of support or resources, I'm here to help you, even though I'm not going to do it for you.
Yeah, and so this is digging a little deeper because of the situation I had not long ago. What if they continue to make excuses and you like I know that you've got an ear for that with your
Sure.
friend. What if you do and you feel angry because you're hearing the excuses of this happened and then that happened and
Yeah.
I cried. How do you because that's what I have so many people coming to me with I'm so frustrated. I have had three conversations, given them opportunities, set dates.
Yeah.
They say they know how to do it, but they're not showing up as knowing how to do it.
Couple important things here. I love your concept of willingness. I think it's one of the most brilliant tools, and we've incorporated it. We use it a lot. So the problem here is that as a leader, I haven't followed through. I have not owned my responsibility for enforcing boundaries, for enforcing consequences. We worked with a large, there's actually a case study in the book about a large car rental company, a national one that we worked with. All of these call center managers were doing this. They were bending over backwards, resourcing their people, and they just weren't meeting standards, weren't meeting standards. Well, it's because they weren't actually enforcing the standards. They were giving them second, third, and fourth chances.
Too
And
many.
yeah, and instead of saying, look, I'm feeling frustrated and angry because I've been trying to support you and you've been saying that you can do it and yet you're not meeting the standards. So I've let you down because I haven't been clear about what's expected and I haven't followed through on my responsibility, which is to enforce the standards. So going forward, you can count on me to be there for you. You can count on me to offer you resources and you can count on me to enforce the consequences.
And that may mean letting someone go if it may, unfortunately, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We used this template to help a nurse manager fire 4 people on the same afternoon, back to back to back to back. And I was there coaching her, and it was an excruciatingly difficult experience, and it was phenomenal. If I could have recorded it, it would have just been such an incredible example about how you can do super hard conversations with really bad outcomes for the person. And yet you preserve dignity and you work at it together.
Yeah. So what was the issue? What was the core issue there? Was it that she had not been there enforcing? Was it, or
Well,
was it something else?
this was a situation where the nurse manager came to work one morning and her CEO had said, "We're downsizing your department." An email, "You're downsizing your department by whatever 10%. Here's a list of people that you need to fire by 5 o'clock today. So go do it." And she looked at the list and she knew immediately these were people with the most seniority who are the highest up on the pay scale. And she knew what was happening. But yet she also felt an obligation to do her role. So she did fire all 4 of them, but she did it using the tools that we teach. And it was and she quit the next day. She was like, "That's the last thing I'm gonna do for this company." And she met one of those people that she had fired a month or 2 later in the grocery store, and that's such a difficult interaction, as you can imagine. And that person came towards her, gave her a hug, and was crying and said, "Thank you so much for treating me with dignity. I knew in my bones that wasn't your call, but you executed your responsibility. You treated me with respect, and you worked with me to make it as good as possible, and I am so grateful to you." So things can be transformative.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that one. Like, did you feel there was opportunity to work with the senior level with the kind of decisions that they're making? Because like that's hard to work in that kind of
Yeah,
environment.
yeah, there was. That's not the whole story. That's just kind of an example of having really difficult conversations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And there's tons of stories in the book about where there's challenges, there's conflicts, things aren't working out, and rather than, putting up our dukes or rather than shutting down, we engage and we come together to solve the problem. And I offer really specific words, phrases, examples about how do you really navigate those situations.
yeah. And I think once you practice it a lot, you're gonna know immediately where those switches are.
Yeah,
I would say just intuitively, I would say the value when it's if you think you're all that in a bag of chips, as a boss, like I have more value than you and my way or the highway. If the value switches off, you can think the other person has capability and that we're both responsible, but I don't see you as valuable. Am I getting that right?
absolutely, absolutely. And this might be an example where when the value switch is turned off for other people, meaning we don't see other people as valuable, that sets the stage for discrimination and abuse
Mm,
and it ruins psychological safety. So
mm.
we might be holding people to very high standards, training them, resourcing them, teaching them, but we don't really care about who they are as individuals, and we don't really care about their experience of being there. And so they feel that it's not safe, and eventually they don't stick around.
Yeah, that made me think of my work as a factory worker back over 20 years ago. You were valuable if they needed you, but otherwise you're a cog in the wheel. And it was so clear on the way you were
Yeah.
treated. You're our most important asset. Hey, you know what? We're shutting down 3 lines. Who's gonna take off? We need you. We're
Yeah.
running
Well,
overtime.
that's an example of conditional value. You're only value on the condition that you can help me. And
Yeah,
when you're no longer valuable or I don't see it, then you're not valuable anymore. So yeah.
I love that. And I think when we were talking, we didn't have those three at the bottom, or maybe I didn't know about them. But that's another layer to this, isn't it? The limited possibility or isolated. Like if I see myself as only responsible, I know you're big on the drama triangle. Do you bring some of that into this book, the
Yeah.
drama triangle?
I do. And it's one of the ways that we can map behavior when the switches are off. An example of the responsibility switch being turned off, I call it isolated. When the switch is off, we try to point fingers. We try to isolate responsibility. And we say things, we try to blame, we point fingers, we try to figure out, all right, well, how come, who's to blame for why that email didn't go out? Or we might blame ourselves and automatically say, oh, that was probably me. And we point all of the fingers at ourselves when what that does is take responsibility away from other people who legitimately should be involved in the solution. So this switch, I really enjoyed mapping out the behaviors because I really challenged leaders to think beyond just behavior. The way you take ownership over your feelings and
Mm,
the way you demonstrate responsibility for your emotions is just as big a part of being healthy as your behaviors.
I think that's still my area for growth. Like I think I'm doing well. I've written a book about it, and then I find that when I feel very angry or emotional, my mind tells me it's not my fault at all. That I've tried as hard as I can.
Mm,
Now this is where the cow eats the cabbage. I
yeah.
do it. You did it. And it is so difficult. And I think it's hard for people to really admit when they're angry, and admitting it is the first part. Like, yeah, I feel anger, but I have choices in how I respond and how I deal with that anger. I think that's hard for a lot of leaders.
Well, there's two layers to this. The first one is when I feel angry, feel frustrated, feel anxious, it's first I have to own it and identify it, but then I have to recognize that that belongs to me. Nobody made me anxious or angry. They're responsible for their behaviors that might be inappropriate, but they're not responsible for how I feel about what happened.
Yeah,
And then the next level is I am also 100% responsible for what I do next with it. So I can't say you really pissed me off, so I'm going to cut you off at the next corner and none of it's going to be my fault when all of it is your responsibility.
that's the hardest lesson right there. And I don't know, maybe that's a lifelong lesson. Maybe we never fully get it because as you grow, you get new opportunities for that lesson in different ways and it sneaks up on you. But
It's a constant work in progress.
I mean, you saw this as a psychologist, right? Like the same principles apply, true?
Absolutely, I did. And in when I was practicing therapy, the models I were using, I look back now, I think they were way too complicated and way too mushy. We
Mhm.
needed really solid, clean, simple ways to help people see what was happening and give it a name and then take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wish I would have had these tools back when I was a therapist.
Well, who knows? Maybe you'll do that on the side a
Yeah.
little bit after you retire,
Yeah, well, yesterday at my book launch, someone who is a therapist told me that she's using these tools in therapy, and that really is making a difference. So that's helpful.
I think there's another book right there, a spinoff, right, of how to use it for therapists. If you had the energy and you were an octopus and could do 8 things. So, like, give me some ideas or give us, I'll take this away for a moment and we'll get back on screen. What are some areas that you would share to help start building a culture of
Yeah,
accountability?
yeah. Well, thank you for asking me that because what we wanted this book to do was not just give people the words, not just give people the mindset, but also give organizations a way to start transforming culture so that you can have a whole culture of compassionate accountability. And so we dedicate a whole section of the book to implementation. And I start with describing a process for establishing behavior norms because ultimately culture includes behavior norms, which is how do we act around here? How are we going to be with each other in a predictable way? And then I lay out 6 different areas of organizational life that you could address and improve through the lens of this. An example would just be your mission, vision, and values. When you evaluate those, do those affirm human value, human capability, and human responsibility? What about your talent recruitment and retention strategies? Are you developing your talent in all three of these areas? What about DEI? I think a lot of DEI initiatives stall out because we focus on the value switch at the expense of the capability and the responsibility switches, and we don't know how to have those conversations around behavior in the context of honoring individual differences.
I love what you're saying because what I see is that although there are stated mission, vision, values, it's sort of disconnected. Like we thought about this at our retreat, we put it on the website, we say it in our PR newsletters and whatnot, and then we don't connect the dots how that behavior does not align with that stated mission, vision, values because it's so nebulous for
Yeah.
most people. You know,
Oh, take a look at policies and practices around discipline and about performance evaluation. They're just fraught with problems when you look at it through the lens of the switches. Those processes do not support usually all three of them. It's one or the other, or one at the expense of the other, and it's a mess. So we can help a lot of organizations improve that part at least.
yeah, so that's a lot of deep thought work and suggestion on even revising policy or ways that we give performance feedback or ways that we attract talent. Like
Yeah,
actually advising at a very high level
yeah,
ways we can incorporate this so that we're more aligned with what we say we want to be.
right, right.
What kind of barriers? I love to talk about barriers.
Yes.
What kind of barriers do you see the most, like organizationally and individually?
Yeah, compassion is great in theory. I think most people would agree, oh, we need more compassion in our world. Yeah, compassionate leaders are great, but it's easier said than done. And so, what we have found working with leaders and organizations moving along this journey is we discovered 5 predictable barriers that are kind of have to do with the way we've come to think about it, the way we see ourselves. For example, one of the barriers is viewing compassion as empathy in action. That's the most popular definition right now out there. Empathy in action. My heart goes out to you. I feel your pain and I want to go fix it. Well, what if I'm not a particularly empathetic person? Then where is my on ramp? Where is my way to be compassionate? And I am not a particularly empathetic person. I miss so many emotional cues of the people I love the most. So does that mean that I can't be compassionate? So we have to think over that barrier. We have to get past it. And another one is that compassion is about alleviating suffering. And my parents were missionaries. I grew up in an environment, they didn't do this, but a lot of missionaries get a bad rap because they go in and try to fix everything and tell everybody what's the right way to do it. And then they leave and everybody's left in the lurch. And so if we think that compassion means in going fixing everybody else's problems, that's a horrible way to lead. You're creating dependence. You're reducing people's capabilities. So we really have to back it up and say, how about if we think about compassion as actually struggling together rather than taking away the struggle? Because the struggle is part of the transformation. That's just 2. And there's 5 that I,
Oh, please. If you feel like that's giving away the book, I don't do it. But like, it's so interesting. I'm writing notes like
yeah.
crazy. One thought that I have is a great article would be empathy versus compassion.
Yeah, I published that article on my blog, and it does get a lot of reads because when we teach people how to do these difficult conversations, we teach 9 strategies for compassion, and only one of them is empathy. And
Well,
so you can't have compassion without empathy, but empathy alone is not sufficient.
I love this. I'm relating it back to, I'm connecting the dots in my own brain because I know that it occurred to me when I was writing my book that we think that the reason we avoid a conversation is because I don't want to hurt your feelings or you're too weak. But the reality is, I don't want to struggle with when you look weak. I don't want to struggle when you cry. I don't want to be the recipient of your
Yeah,
anger. It's always self related in some way. And so I love struggle with because if I'm willing to struggle, I'm willing to feel whatever comes up.
yeah.
Don't have to rescue it though.
Right. And just look how the way we even talk about this reveals a responsibility switch problem. When I say I don't want to hurt your feelings, what I'm saying is I actually can be responsible for your feelings, which means my switch is off. I'm not responsible for your feelings. I'm responsible for mine and my behavior. And so how often do we just not let people own their stuff
Yeah.
and value it You don't have to fix it,
Yeah,
right?
I'm saying on a personal level, I was talking with my sister-in-law the other day, making some decisions for the elderly in-laws, and she
Yeah,
said, and he better not complain. I said, or it's okay that he complains because that's what he feels, and we can be present to that.
yeah.
It's like, he better not complain, or I'm gonna like what? Like he's complaining, he's not happy. It's okay for someone not to be happy all the time.
One of the first lessons we teach our children is it's okay to feel angry. It's not okay to hit.
Yeah,
So, what if we actually lived that out the rest of our lives and said, it is okay to be angry? This was a tough decision I made. I can imagine you're anxious about what this is going to mean for you. And it's not okay what you did. And we're going to have consequences because we have to send the right message in our culture. We
yeah.
can have both at the same time. And not only that, but I'm still here for you as you struggle with what this means. I'm not going away.
Absolutely. We can have an awkward moment, and this is
Yeah.
who we are, and it can be better. It can be better in 5 minutes or one day or 3 weeks, right?
Here's what cracks me up in movies. My wife hates it. I do it all the time. The classic line in movies is someone will come and confront someone like, I can't believe you said that, and you need to whatever. And then they just walk away. Like they drop this emotional bomb and walk away. And that happens all the time to create drama, right? What if we actually revealed these emotional challenges and then moved closer instead of pulling away from each
Yeah,
other?
yeah. And we have not been programmed to do that. But it's like almost every movie. Well, I know every sitcom, like everybody loves Raymond. If you ever watch any late night sitcoms or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's always based on lying, on covering, and on protecting and rescuing. The
Yep.
whole storyline
Yep.
is about "Don't tell them I told you that," right?
All kinds of games.
Yeah, so we're just about out of time. Is there any like one last tip, one thing I didn't ask, one thing you want to share? I know share where to get your book for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've created a really simple URL, compassionateaccountabilitybook.com, and it goes straight to our website, straight to the book page. It's available now for order. Today, while we're recording, it's number one on Amazon in the organizational development category, and it's climbing fast
Good.
on in a couple other categories. So here's what I would leave. And this is really for not just leaders, but anyone who is in relationships is we no longer have the luxury of choosing between being nice and getting results. Today's organizations, today's relationships require both in full measure. And so it's not enough to just say when push comes to shove, you got to get the job done, or when push comes to shove, save the relationship. That's a cop out. So what I've offered in this book is a way for you to not choose one over the other, but choose both at the same time and watch what happens. It really can make a huge difference.
I love it. I love it. And here it is, everybody. You see it on the back, but here it is. I've got it bookmarked and underlined. I always have every book I love, but you want to get this, get it today if you can. And thank you so much for joining me, Nate. And I wish you luck on the launch.
Marlene, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Love being with you and your listeners today.
Thank you.